Never Stop Learning is what we're going to focus on today. And really view these, I don't know if I give you this illustration yet or not, so here we are again. But we picked 5 of like what we think are the distinctive markers of like, this is what a leader looks like at Passion Creek. And if not, we're going to have conversations. But I really view it as like a bouquet. Have I told you guys this yet? Wonderful. So really think about like a bouquet. Let's say it's 5 flowers, which, you know, I imagine the good ones are 10. But let's say it's a bouquet of 5 flowers.
About flowers in your life?
Yeah.
Not a single day.
Just diamonds. So she shows none. Like, anyways, why didn't you put them on today? So, simplicity. That's why she sold them. She gave them away. So, moving on. These flowers, right? So these 5, it's really imperative for us to hold ourselves accountable at our team. All 5 need to be functioning well. Or else, let's say you're great at 4 of them, but one of them isn't. It's like giving a bouquet of 4 amazing flowers, but one dead one. Now that whole bouquet is bad, right? Like there's a dead flower in it. It gets all the attention. So we're gonna try to keep, okay, these 5, like this is our bouquet to our community. And it's really important, I think, just the way that we are, you know, naturally wired. Some of us, this is gonna be easy. Others of us, it's more difficult. So as part of a pastoral job is to keep reminding us what these values are and how we can live them out. And so we're gonna talk about Never Stop Learning. So I'm gonna give like 4 key ideas behind what we mean when we say leaders at our church, we hold ourselves accountable to never stop learning. Now, other people at our church, we don't hold them to that standard because they're not there yet. We model it, but for us, we have the permission to speak into each other's life. Like, hey, like this isn't what we do. So the first one is we are self-correcting without becoming self-condemning. Okay, this is, man, if we figure this out, ministry goes super well, right? So self-correcting without being self-condemning. I think that's one of the hardest things I've had to learn in ministry because I don't want to be a condemning person, so therefore I don't correct myself because I feel like that's condemning, but that's not the point, right? And so because of the grace of Jesus, we can be honest about our weaknesses and about our strengths. And so in our own leadership, like I think true leaders, we don't need to wait for another leader to point out some things. Like for us, we should keep thinking, how am I processing this? How are my emotions? How are my leadership skills, communication? What can I do better? Like we were even thinking about, you know, like for our Pizza with the Pastors, the first one we did versus this last one we did, totally different. How come? We self-corrected. We're like, okay, we tried it. We didn't inspire them enough. We went way too in the weeds. We went way too much strategy and not enough vision. So let's change it, right? So it's okay to do that. So, but with that, with self-correction means self-awareness, right? Which is like key with emotional health. So I found, here's a few questions to ask yourself to help you begin that process of self-correction. Again, this is not condemnation. We all have weaknesses. We all mess up. We all have bad days. And if we equate that with condemnation, we'll never grow. So here's some of the questions. How do you know when you are not well? Right? Like even this weekend, I even told Jordan on the way, I was like, I'm off. I don't know what it is. So trying to process, how come I'm off? What's not going well? What are some cues for you guys? How do you know like things aren't going great? What's a practice that takes 5 minutes or less that helps you connect back to God? Right? So to self-correct is to be aware, okay, something's off. Is there something I can do in 5 minutes or less that can at least get me kind of on a level playing field? What are some things you guys have found that's been helpful? Love that. So big question too, what sort of leadership situations generate anxiety for you? Any other situations generate anxiety? Yeah, I hate when it's like, oh no, now I have to have a conversation or else this won't be fixed. I wish they could fix it on their own, but this isn't happening, so now we need to have the convo, and I hate that. Okay, what types of people trigger you the most? And this is the biggest leadership question. What do you do to stay connected to them? So like this whole idea of church leadership is we don't have the convenience. Everybody talks about just blow them off or, you know, have boundaries or don't talk to them anymore. Cut out the toxic people. Well, and as ministry leaders, now, if there's somebody who's literally, you know, committing a sin that hurts people, we will exercise church discipline, and there's those cases. But a lot of us, we're going to deal with people, you know what, they're the worst, but they're showing up every week, they're serving under your ministry, they're technically doing all the things that need to be done. How do you stay connected with them even though they bother you? You figure that out, that's ministry. But what are some of the ways that helps you connect, even when you disagree with them? I'm pretty convinced a lot of churches stay small because they avoid confrontation, they avoid the hard convo, and they don't know how to stay connected. So if we disagree on something, we're done. Either you got to leave this church or I got to leave this church. And the reality is no, this is conflict is what connects us. Like that is the step. I'm reading a book right now called Resilient Teams, and it talks about you don't have a team till you've had conflict. Like you don't have an effective leadership team if you guys haven't disagreed about stuff. And it's actually my theory why Pixar is not good anymore. So Ed Catmull wrote a book, Creativity Inc., and he said their number one reason why they're good at making movies is candor. Everybody can call each other out at all times. But we're in a new this was, he developed that culture in the 90s. We're in a new generation where words, we're so offended by anything and everything that I imagine Pixar doesn't have that healthy feedback culture like they used to. And now you're starting to see their product go down, right? So and that's what I love about this room. I think we can say this in all honesty because we've all had feedback with each other. We've all had hard conversations. And you're in this room because you responded well to them, like you didn't run away, or you're like, okay, that's a good call. We're calling it, it's not being called out, it's being called up, and these conversations are really hard. But staying connected to them is huge. Last one, and then we'll move on. Criticism's tough. What type of criticism most affects you? Because really, you haven't led yet until you've been criticized, right? So if you haven't been criticized yet, you will be. What's the kind that affects you the most? Here's the next thing. We are ministry correcting without becoming ministry condemning. Okay? So we never stop learning ways to make our ministry better, to make our department better. Song of Songs 225 says, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyards are in bloom. What is that saying? We are in a harvest season. This is beautiful, but these little foxes are ruining it all. The system works. We figured out how to plant. We figured out how to do all the reaping and sowing. And now this outside factor's coming in and ruining what we've worked so hard to do. So the question is, what are the little foxes in your ministry? Right? So you can focus on all the stuff you've done right, but there's always going to be another fox jumping in. I guess in our modern day translation, it's like the coyotes, right? Like I got the perfect farm and now the coyotes keep coming in. I got to get rid of these coyotes, right? What are, in your mind, the little foxes in your area of ministry? Like, what's the one area that needs working on? This isn't condemning. This isn't, I've done bad. It's, look, we've actually done a lot of change. I'm really impressed with how much we've improved. But there's always little foxes. So in your mind, I want us all to have an answer, but a few can maybe even answer out loud right now. What's a little fox? We still have a few foxes that we need to get rid of. And so, again, I think with Christians, we want to be so nice. We want to be so positive. We're not willing just to be, like, realistic. I think it was Max Dupree. He has this line. He says, the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality, right? So we are people that define the future and vision, but you can't get there unless you know where you're at, right? So, hey, this is where we're at. We're gonna explain all the great ways where we're at, but here's some things that we're still missing the mark on. The big one on Never Stop Learning is we don't attack feedback. I learned this most when I was writing a book. Feedback is your best friend, because if you allow your friends to give you feedback, it might save you from really bad reviews, on Amazon later. So like, it's a really, really humbling thing to do, but getting feedback is your best friend. I saw this line from John Acuff the other day. I thought it was so good. A leader who can't be questioned always winds up doing questionable things. And so straight up, I think me and Caleb hopefully have modeled this. You can question us in this room too, right? Especially, not maybe in front of everybody. I think that's a bit disrespectful. There's a time and a place. But those who like, hey, I can't be questioned, don't ask me. That's not, that is a very unhealthy formula for a very unhealthy pastor, unhealthy deacon, unhealthy staff member, right? We give candor, but we can do that because we do life together. We love each other. We're on the same mission. We're reminded of all the positives, but we have to be like, hey, I'm going to ask, why are you doing X, Y, and Z? And this is huge. And I would say, I really believe the Lord's going to continue to bring favor on our church, and we're going to grow. And as things grow, what people tend to do within leadership teams is not ask any more questions, because it's obviously working, right? Why would I ask the pastor why he's doing this? We just baptized 10 last week, so we're good. No. Ask the question, right? Because so many churches fail because growth, we're healthy because we're growing. Meanwhile, they're rotting on the inside. Staff hates each other. There's division. Pastor's not living out the walk, all of that stuff, right? So we're an accountability team, right? And that's the only way we can keep being healthy. So consider the feedback. Consider the source, right? So like, nobody's Jesus. Sometimes they are wrong, but try to find something, a kernel of truth that they brought up, and then create a plan of action. Thank them for the feedback. And you don't always have to apply the feedback, but don't be like, oh, why would you question me, right? A leader who can't be questioned always winds up doing questionable things. Last one.
I think can I just say something?
Of course.
Sorry. I think the hard thing too for people because I think you, me, and
who are you pointing at?
Are all the same. Jordan,
the ones in the room?
Yeah, all the ones.
Okay.
In that my instinct to, and I've had to learn this really recently, is that I always assume that feedback is always critical. So getting to the point where you can, and that's why I think the breath prayers and stuff like that, the 5-minute deep presses are really good, because you will, the default I think for a lot of us is to just assume that the feedback is personal and it's unconstructive and it's not good. But I think there's always some wisdom, and that's our job as leaders, is to figure out, okay, I'm not going to react to this, but I need to figure out what's actually true, even though it's likely 80% of it's not, or 90 or whatever.
Your friend, true friends, it feels like it's wounding. But it's such a good point. Sometimes when people critique our church, I'm like, I know, I agree to that too, but it takes a long time to change. I don't have the people for that yet. There's 18 other things. That's number 19 I totally want to take care of. Yeah. But there's 3 other things that we got to fix now, Or I had a terrible week, so I don't have the energy to do that this week, but we'll start tackling it next, right?
The real call of leadership is they don't know my intentions. So they don't know that I've been wrestling.
Yes.
Right. So I need to assume that they are coming to me in good faith, rather than assume that it's...
So instead of being mad that they didn't know your intentions, you should also they have the best intentions.
Yeah. Exactly. That's, I think...
Boom.
I love that.
Even we've grown in that.
Servanthood mindset, though. Very servanthood mindset. That's how we serve others. It's not, they offended me. It's, okay, how can I look at what they're saying as it's good?
Yeah. And even more recently, I was finally able to be like, okay, Caleb, what's wrong with this sermon? How would you put in your 2 cents? And then he got that text, that text message a couple weeks ago, right? So even that, I'm just saying I'm really bad at this too, but I know a lot of times they say at least 7 years in, your leadership culture is who you are. So anytime I see a weakness, it's because of me. I started that, So I know within me naturally, I don't like feedback. So I imagine our group probably doesn't love feedback. So, okay, but we need it. Man, it is the oxygen behind a healthy team. It's the oxygen behind a fruitful mission. But how can there's a time and a place, all that. Now, we never stop learning how to best lead each member of our team. This is like parenting, right? We thought we figured out parenting with Faith, and then Sayla was totally different. So now we had to start over. What works, what doesn't work. Spankings work for one, just a stern look works for the other, right? It's all this other stuff, right? So it's learning your team members is huge. This is especially a challenge because you guys have the biggest volunteer base, right? So figuring out what works for each one can be really hard. So we want to be helpful here. Whenever there's something, here's the key idea. Whenever the team member isn't meeting expectations, one of 4 things are happening. Either on our side, we're not giving them enough training or resources. So they just don't know what to do. We're mad at them, but it was our fault. Or on their side, they just don't have the skill set or the desire. So you can train them and resource them all day, but if they don't care, they're not going to do it. If they're just not teachers, they're not going to teach, right? So we need the right seat in the right spot. So it's like, hey, thank you for trying, but you're not teaching. So let's move you to another spot. Right? But we have to first look at how am I resourcing and training and encouraging them. So here's 7 ways that people enjoy feedback or people feel loved. Okay. So 1 is public thanks. Actually, I'm very curious. Who likes being shouted out in the circle or even on a Sunday morning? Raise your hand. Just so you know, I love it. So I love public thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, in the form of a check, please. Just kidding. I'll take any of them, guys. Private thanks. So I've learned some people, they don't want to get shouted out from the stage, but if you write them a thank you note or just pull them aside, here, this is what I saw you do. I'm really grateful for that. Please don't be shy here. Who appreciates that kind of feedback? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so public thanks, private thanks, freedom. So this means, if you remember the last time our leadership session, it was, hey, here's the parameters. Now as long as you're following the value, the vision, our framework, have fun. So some people, it's like, don't tell me how to do it. I'm just going to get it done. Access, this means like mentorship, right? Like, hey, you're just included in the room. You're in the room where it happens, right? You're a part of the meetings. I want to be able to listen and give feedback, but also just be around that leader. Some people will demand more of your time. They just want to be around you more. Input on decisions is next. So like, I know some people, they value if I go to them and go, hey, here's what we're doing. But before we do that, what's your thoughts? Like, do you have a perspective on this? I haven't thought everything through. What are your ideas? Increase responsibility. Okay, it's the whole idea of like, cool, you've done it. Let's give you more. Let's give you in control of this. Let's help you run that. Who likes to increase their responsibility?
Who wants more to do?
Who wants more? Got him. The last one, the right tools. So like, you just feel best equipped. You gave me everything. You gave me the workbook. You gave me an outline. You gave me a bonus flash drive in case I run out of time. You know, like all of this. Who loves like just being equipped with the right tools? Wonderful. So think about that and what your people need, right? And some of them are different. Some of them, they can just wing it the whole service, you know, but they need to be publicly thanked. Others, they just need the step-by-step. I'm overwhelmed. You're not telling me everything. So that's something that like, hey, do you need me to walk you through all these steps? I can. Or do you get it? You know, that kind of thing.